All right. Let's just jump right into it, huh? So my original interests are this idea of exploration versus exploitation. So when you are dropped on a map, it can be in a video game, it can be in real life. Are you more likely to go out and explore things, or are you going to exploit what you already have? I was connecting that concept with this idea of what are the drivers of digital media use. So, in this explore exploit paradigm, I was thinking those who go out and want to explore more are more likely to use digital media. And then moving forward from that, could you classify people using the internet as explorers and exploiters? So, with this in mind, I came across a talk at what's called Minecore. Um, and this person who's, can I do this? Yeah, right here. Dr. Lyden Stolly. He gave this talk. It was online. And he did what I was hoping to do. He classified people as either hunters or busybodies. And they had them look at Wikipedia and try to see if there were behavior differences. So looking a little bit closer at this, you have this idea of a path length here. So the path length is represented by these nodes and then the paths between them. He had participants look at Wikipedia pages, and each Wikipedia page is represented by a node. Sometimes these nodes are close together, signifying that they are closely related. And sometimes they are really far apart. So this would be something that's really different from each other. Another idea behind this thought process is clustering. So you would have these three concepts that are very similar and interlocking, and they would be clustered together. So with these path lengths and clustering, you would get these beautiful knowledge networks. So all of these are different people who he brought into the lab, had them look at Wikipedia pages. And then depending on how closely related those Wikipedia pages were or how different they were, they built these little knowledge networks off of them. And I thought this was really neat. So that brings me to the paper that I didn't have you guys read, but I'm going to at least talk about today, called The Growth and Form of Knowledge Networks by Kinesthetic Curiosity. And the first thing that I was like, all right, cool, let's look at this paper. How do they classify curiosity? Well, the practice of curiosity can be viewed as an extended and open-ended search of valuable information with hidden identity and location in a complex space of interconnected information. Woof. I didn't realize when I picked this paper, because it was originally for a journal club, that it was so dense and so abstract and so meta. But I was super interested in it, right? So my goal with this presentation is to take these abstract concepts, make them a little bit more concrete, and understand it a little bit more. That way, you can take this idea and understand it and be excited about it without being lost in the weeds. So, some opening arguments in the page. The first thing they mention is that seeking information is vital to doing well in life. I think that's easy enough to understand if you are stuck in your house or if you don't do anything. Hey, Rafalski, thank you for joining. This is a bit of a science stream here. We're talking about kinesthetic curiosity. It's a little dense, but feel free to ask questions. And we'll just continue this. We're talking about a paper called The Growth and Form of Knowledge Networks by Kinesthetic Curiosity. And one of their opening arguments is seeking information is vital to doing well in life. And I think that's easy enough to get behind. However, judging information is very costly. So when you look up something, say you just want to look up what food near you, and you want to look for Chinese food. Say there's like 5 different Chinese restaurants near you. You have to judge which one you want to go to, and that's costly. But curiosity might be a way we overcome these costs. So if you're curious about something, say maybe a particular dish, you're more willing to go out and seek out that information, try that, and continue to move on. So they move on to this idea of a kinesthetic curiosity model, and they classify people into 3 separate beings. One is a busybody, one is a hunter, and one is a dancer. For the busybody, they classify those as those who jump from topic to topic, little fleeting people who look for information. And to make that a little bit concrete, that means the path length is longer and the clustering is down. So if you look at this knowledge network over here, you can kind of see how these are loosely connected, but it's not like over here where it's really, really dense in information. And kind of going back, in case you weren't here, each of these are, hey, welcome. I can't think of anything. We're talking about kinesthetic curiosity today. It's a little dense, but feel free to ask questions along the way. Each of these Wikipedia pages represent a node in here, and sometimes they are closely related. And can you see my mouse? You can see my mouse. Okay, good. And other times they're really loosely related. For the busybody, you're going to have really long path lengths and low clustering. The next part is the hunter, which I think is the easiest to understand. It really beelines towards what you're looking for. This is when you have a very particular goal in mind. You want to learn something very specific. They have the path lengths are down, you can see here, and the clustering is up. So all of these, we're going to go back to the Wikipedia page example. You have very closely related objects here and very small path lengths here. So everything is really closely related. The last one we have is the dancer, which they leap from topic to topic, but they kind of stay within a interlocking of information. So the path lengths are up and the clustering is also up. This is kind of a neat thing because it's kind of in between the busybody and the hunter. So you have these networks that are so closely related to each other, but they still have clusters of information differing. So I would think this would be like, I think the example I saw in a paper was, say this is all about elephants. This would be again about war elephants. This might be about, a specific war using war elephants. And then maybe this is the region that the elephants live in, and then you're back to elephants again. So they're all related, but these would be super different, and these would be closely related. So then the paper goes into 4 different sections. Knowledge network growth principles, integrating models of curiosity and learning, neural implementation and evolutionary origins, and the expanded current taxonomies of curiosity. So, starting off, we have knowledge network principles. The first one that they talk about is this idea of edge reinforcement, which are movements to discover new information that can be biased by memory of the familiar. And I think the easiest way to think about this is, I think people would agree here, is a foraging map. So this was actually made in StarCraft, the original one. I made a foraging map involving a base, which is the supply depot, and crystals, which were kind of, I think they're described as doodads. The idea was you had to navigate this map and find these crystals. And I think this will help make this a little bit more concrete to understand. So starting off, you tend to take the same path. If you're dropped in this kind of map, you find something, you go back and forth. Yeah, are you familiar with StarCraft? But anyway, you tend to take the same path back and forth. You're not gonna, after you find something, go all the way out here, turn around, and then come back. You're gonna take the most efficient back and forth. The next is this idea of deprivation sensitivity, or the aversion to uncertainty. You're going to stay close to your main base here. You're not going to go too far to the edges here, away from what you already know. The example I use for this for digital media is for you take the same path. I don't know about you guys, but when I need to search for something, I always use Google. I Google it and then it brings me to the Wikipedia page and then I go to the Wikipedia page. I never go to Wikipedia first, which is funny because, I know I'm going to go to Wikipedia. But it's this, yeah, exactly. It's the first page only. And that's what I bring up for the deprivation sensitivity, right? If you don't find what you're searching for right away, you just revise your search, right? Like if you don't find it on the first page, you never go to the second page. And that's what I use as my example for deprivation sensitivity, like your aversion to uncertainty. You know that first page is good, so you don't go anywhere else. The next aspect is this idea of levy flights, which are search patterns that can be biased to efficiently explore space. So, one of the first things they look at is the ratio of resources encounters versus finding nothing. And in this kind of paradigm, you have your resources here, but you have a whole lot of nothing here. That ratio is big. And if you take that into a digital media aspect, you have your information you're looking for, and then you have a whole bunch of noise. You have a whole bunch of misinformation that's surrounding it. So it can be very costly to find what you're looking for, which is that very specific information. The next is the cost of energy getting to your destination. It's really easy to understand this in this kind of map because it takes no time at all to get to something close by, but if you're going something further, it takes longer. Well, if you think of energy as mental energy, if you are, or for an example, me, I look up Photoshop stuff. Oh, yes. So the main information you want to find using Wikipedia would be at the beginning. Maybe something else and maybe, yes, that's exactly right, yes. But mostly filled with other stuff. Exactly, you're getting it. Yeah. So, like, if you're looking for something, it could be a lot further down, but that's going to take a lot more time and energy. Yes. And then if you're looking at the resource from finding something versus finding nothing, that's the same exact thing. So these knowledge networks, they're trying to find the most efficient way of doing this, and these concepts help lower the cost. So the next aspect is the distance from one topic to another. So this would be like, say I was looking up tutorials for Photoshop, right? Well, while I'm doing that, that's costly trying to find exactly what I'm looking for. And then I'm like, wait a second, where exactly is this part of the brain? You're switching gears and picking something else to look at. That would be something that's distant from each other, and that's going to cost more energy than if you were still looking for the same thing, which would be the Photoshop. All of these things kind of come together to form three ways of how you're integrating curiosity. Getting sidetracked, not a problem. Exactly, but that's exactly right. You're getting sidetracked with something else. It might be still related, because maybe I need to know that part of the brain before the Photoshop thing, but it's something completely different. You're not going to be able to compress that information down. Integrating models of learning and curiosity. So you have these mind maps here, basically. These will grow as you get more information from them. Each of these maps are made up by nodes and hubs and modules, and the closer they're related to each other, the more related they are. Models of curiosity can also be models of learning. So say you have your morning commute, right? And you're trying to make that as efficient as possible. That you can think of that as a similar way as when you're looking at information, right? So you're trying to find the most efficient way from getting to point A to point B. Maybe you Google something, you go to the Wikipedia page, and then you pick a specific source from that. Well, when you're trying to condense that, sometimes you use information seeking to do it. So maybe you try, instead of the bus, you take the trolley, or if you, instead of the bus, you carpool or something, like trying to figure out the most efficient way. That would be an information seeking way. Or you could be like at home and be like, you know what, maybe if I make my breakfast sooner, I can have that, and that'll be a quicker way of getting there. You could try to do the similar thing with looking for information. So you could be like, well, let me try just going to Wikipedia first. Or let me, look at something else other than Wikipedia to get my information. That would be information seeking. Or you could be, sitting in bed thinking, I was like, wait a minute, what if I did this instead? That would both be ways of how these are kind of integrated together. It's basically taking a same concept, but applying it to something else. And that's what they're arguing in this paper. So, the way that curiosity is like learning, first try Google that if not using it. Exactly. Yes. This is exactly what this is. And it's using the same thing that you would use in real life. For my example is for a morning commute. So curiosity and learning are integrated in 3 ways, they argue. They're involved with compression using edge reinforcement and levee flights. So if you remember, this is all the different aspects of this section. And the way that they compress it is using these lengths and clustering. So if something's really close together or really clustered together, those will be compressed together for information. So say this cluster here is all Photoshop, that will be compressed down into one section. And lastly, curiosity may lower the cost of information. So through these levee flights and edge reinforcement and the clustering to compression, this will lower the cost of information. It will lower the mental exhaustion, basically. All right. So this, because they're associated, absolutely. Yep, that's exactly right. I get there, and there mixed up all the time, and it's frustrating. Like, I know the difference between them, but typing it out and typing quickly, it drives me nuts. So this is the section that's a little bit more concrete. It's the neural implementation and evolutionary origins. So they split these into 3 different scales. First is the microscale, where neural mechanisms of curiosity involve the dopaminergic function, and that looks like this. The dopaminergic function is basically your drive to do something. It's a very rewarding circuit. So it's if you start thinking about cookies, and then you're like, oh wow, I'm gonna go get a cookie. That's this activation because you're thinking about that reward, you're going to it. No worries. It was good to see you. I'll probably. Oh no, please don't. I hope you're gonna be okay, bud. And they think that this came about evolutionarily because you would forage in like a hunter-gatherer type situation. And as they became more complex, this kept getting more involved and you got curious about it. The next section is the mesoscale, which is involved with more spatial and structural learning focused inside the hippocampal and neuronal circuit. That's this circuit here. Knowing about the specific areas of brain isn't terribly important. It's just basically letting you know that you're able to bring in spatial information and whatnot. And again, this is going back to the hunter-gatherer evolutionary thought process where as you got more complex, you need to make better plans, so you have to structurally bring out a map in your mind to plan things out. That's all this is saying. And the last section is the macro scale, which is the frontal parietal circuit. This is involved in executive function, learning, information compression. This is going back to those hubs and nodes, bringing that information that's similar together and cramming it into basically one little thing. So this whole section is just basically showing you the different areas of the brain that are involved with kinesthetic curiosity. So lastly, we are getting into the section of the paper called Expanding Current Taxonomies of Curiosity. And these are on an X and Y axis. And the first type of curiosity we're going to talk about is diversive curiosity, which is a drive to explore different information. In other words, less clustering. We have specific curiosity, which is the desire for particular relevant pieces of information, aka more clustering. And then you have perceptual curiosity, which is the drive to seek novel sensory information. This is more distance between the two nodes, so the path lengths are longer. And lastly, the epistemic curiosity, which is the drive to learn conceptual knowledge and regulate uncertainty, which is less distance between the nodes. Now, I was the one to come up with the concepts, well, not come up with the concepts, but attach these concepts to these types of curiosity. So less clustering, more distance between the nodes, less distance. This is the way I interpreted it. So when I present this to my lab tomorrow, I'm going to see if this is the correct way to think about this. So I don't know if anyone here is going to be like, oh yeah, let me look into kinesthetic curiosity. Fresh Shelf Online said that this is how it is. Don't quote me on it, but I don't expect anyone to quote me on it anyway. But this is how I made this a little bit more concrete. And taking these concepts, you can take the dancer, which has more clustering and more distance between the nodes, the hunter, which is more clustering and less distance from the nodes, and the busybody, which is less clustering and less distance between the nodes. And this is where they would hit on these axes. I don't know if they have anything to classify something with more, what would this be? More clustering, less clustering and more distance less distance. I don't think they have anything to fill this square, is basically what I'm trying to say. But for the ones that we have, I think this is where they would lie. So the conclusion is very, very similar to what you would see in any paper. It just more distance, less clustering. Correct. And I don't know what that would look like, except for maybe just dots on a thing. Like there's no connection. Airheaded. Yeah. See ya. Bye, Saren. I'm almost done anyway. This conclusion is basically just a typical one. They just go through the whole entire paper and make summary sentences. But the most interesting part is this at the end, which is the outstanding questions. So how does the knowledge network structure and information compression influence learning, creativity, and social interactions? The part that I'm most interested in is the social interactions part. So if we have a hunter, busybody, and maybe a dreamer. Ooh, I love that. That would be really cool. Although airheaded is pretty funny. So a dreamer is really interesting. I don't see, this is the interesting part. They don't go into it at all, but it'd be interested to look into what that would look like. Or if we would look into, like that one picture, we had all those knowledge networks in there to see if we could pick some out to be considered what we would call a dreamer. But yeah, going to this, I'm super interested in the social interactions. I would be interested to look into how different social media platforms push you to be a certain way, right? So like if maybe Facebook, because it's so like you scroll down and you see people's stuff, maybe that's a little bit more of a certain way compared to maybe Tumblr, which is very different in categories and whatnot. Targeted ads would be another way. Yep. Like, does that make you more likely to be a hunter per se. It's like, oh, you browse through this one thing, and they're like, hey, here's the thing, here's the thing, here's the thing. Like, that's one topic. So I'd be interested to see some work done in that, or maybe I do it myself. The next aspect is how could the brain implement kinesthetic curiosity with mechanisms of foraging, spatial navigation, cognitive maps, and information compression. With my past work, this is something I would be super interested in because I've done foraging work and spatial navigation. So I would love to basically have people look at the internet, do a foraging task, and then put them in the fMRI scanner to see if there's some areas of the brain that light up while you're browsing through the internet. I don't even know how exactly that would work because that sounds really difficult, but it'd be interesting to look at the very least. And the last section is talking about individual differences. So instead of comparing a busybody, a hunter, or a dancer, what are these individual differences within these categories that make them different? Like I always find looking, because not everyone's the same, right? Everyone's different. So looking at these individual differences may help us understand what exactly is going on while we hunt for information. So hopefully I haven't bored you guys too much, but that's the end of my presentation.